Australian nationalists have met at the Tempe offices of Australia First Party to celebrate, and it is celebrate, the 4th anniversary of the death of Alex Norwick in 2018, 11th of September 2018. We're here to commemorate Alex's commitment through his work and also the significance of his work and how it's been played out in our movement over the many decades. Alex Norwick contributed, often under the name Alex Saunders, various texts that are now published by Australian nationalists and are available in pamphlet form and otherwise online. He also contributed innumerable articles under his own name and other pen names to Australian nationalist publications, addressed various forums and meetings that are recorded and so forth. People would, generally speaking, would refer to Alex as an ideologue of Australian nationalism. His contribution is very singular. I first met Alex Norwick in 1976. He had been a member of various nationalist-minded groups, and I met him, and then subsequently I met other people, and together we formed one of Australia's first nationalist political organisations. Alex realised that the main enemy of Australian identity, independence and freedom did not really come from the political left, although the left could be obnoxious in 1,000 ways. He identified that it actually came from the right, that it was the White Australia policy which was abandoned by the Liberal Party, and even more interestingly, the doctrine of multiculturalism, did not so much come from Whitlam's Labor government, but was something invented and designed by a man, Zabriskie, who worked for W.C. Wentworth, a senior Liberal. But it also went further with Alex. He looked at the international cosmology of the time. Where were Australia's enemies? Well, he reached a revolutionary conclusion. Yes, he said, the Soviet Union is not our friend, but the Soviet Union is not the enemy either. In other words, he said that the real enemies were at home, and the real enemies were in fact our allies. They were the people condemning us into the market future, into Asia, into open door immigration, and so on and so forth. This didn't exactly make Alex very popular in certain circles in which he moved, but it certainly made him very popular with the first of the Australian nationalists. He passed directly into those movements: National Resistance, National Alliance, then National Action. Alex was a continuous activist all the way through the 1980s, and he remained an activist into the 90s in various causes. He was a publisher, he was a speaker, he turned up in many, many places. When Australia First was reformed in 2007, Alex was one of its members and became the editor of the magazine Audacity, the name of the first Australian nationalist publication founded in 1977. The works of Alex Norwick I commend to all Australian nationalists. I commend them to examine his thoughts, albeit from the past, and his writings in more recent times. There are very few people who have had such a major influence on Australian nationalist activists and thinkers than Alex Norwick. He was a brilliant conversationalist, and he made it his business to engage, particularly with the newer generation of people, as to what the fundamental ideas of Australian nationalism were. I'd like to close on this single comment. It was Alex Norwick and myself, but chiefly I would say Alex Norwick, who actually made a radical definitional thing about Australian nationalism. He said, well, we didn't invent it. None of us were its designers. It existed completely independently of us. It was a truth, and it had three constituent elements. He said the first element in it was Australian nativism, the idea that our ethnic identity had nativised to the Australian soil and created a unique Australian culture and identity. Point one. He also said that Australia's radical nationalist writers from the 1880s, 90s, turn of the century and forwards designed many interpretative aspects of that identity, that concept of freedom, and they developed it into a discourse that said that Australia needed to break free of old ideological labels and so forth and reach out in various ways to affirm ourselves. The third aspect, in which Alex deeply believed, was labourism, the original labour movement and its ideals. He was a producerist, Alex said. I believe that wealth is generated by the labour of all working people, be they farmers or workers or tradesmen, small business people, anybody at all who labours creates wealth. This wealth isn't simply to be shared, it is to be generated so we all earn a share of the Australian promise that dates back to the original founder, if you like, of labourism, William Lane. Alex believed that labourism was an enormous truth, and because it was the way it was and was opposed to the conservative interpretation of Australian identity and values and the idea of the trader class monopolising conservatism, he said that this makes it a radical proposition. These three things defined Australian nationalism. If there's any epitaph that can be written to Alex Norwick, it is that he helped to define the essence of a struggle that we now carry on in contemporary times with contemporary slogans and methods. Vile Alex Norwick, always present. Thank you.